Welcome to The Culture Bar, a panel discussion podcast exploring, dissecting, and shedding light on important topics in the arts and music world which matter to you.
Hello, I'm Fiona Livingston, and in this podcast we will be discussing Smashing the Glass Ceiling, Women in Publishing. I'm excited to be joined by Katie Packer, commissioning editor at Headline Publishing, to explore this topic and find out more about what it means to be a woman in publishing. Thank you for joining us, Katie.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you for coming. During our conversation, we will celebrate the successes of women in publishing, including challenges overcome, success stories, and identifying gaps for improvement in the industry, and hopefully try to dispel some myths and give some words of advice for budding women publishers and authors. There's a lot to cover here, and it's great to have Katie's perspective and experience to help us navigate this topic. So I think it will be really interesting to start our conversation, Katie, by finding out more about you. Could you tell us about your journey as a woman in publishing? So how you got started, what motivated you, and what kind of roles you've had?
Yeah, sure. I think I grew up in a sort of background where I didn't really know publishing existed. I used to steal my mum's adult books as I was growing up, and that was kind of how I fell in love with reading and kind of realised that books were my bag, basically. And then I went to university and I did English and came out and was like, actually, I started to hear about publishing and what it was. So I started to do my research, and I was sort of between that and radio. But radio felt like even more of a pipe dream than publishing, even though publishing is it can be hard to get into. But I sort of did all my research and then applied and managed to get in on an internship with #UK. And I did a 2-month internship where I went around all the different departments, from editorial to marketing to publicity. I did a day in finance. Needless to say, that was a very long day for me. And in the end, I realized I really, really loved editorial, and I managed to get a job as an assistant, assisting 3 children's publishers. And that was great. I learned a lot from them. It was hard at times. I don't think I'm a very assistant person, so I did struggle a bit, but managed to get a job as an assistant editor, again within #UK, but for Headline, which is the we do adult publishing within nonfiction, because I think I basically am a bit of a pop culture buff nerd. And I think that shone through, and I've been at Headline ever since. I've been at Headline for over 4 years now, and started out as an assistant editor, and now I am a commissioning editor, and have my own list, and I love it. It's such a fulfilling job. But I'm lucky to have learned from that internship about lots of different areas of publishing as well, which has really helped me sort of on my way up.
Oh, that's amazing, Katie. And who do you have on your list? Can you share?
Oh, of course, yeah. So I published last year Sunday Times bestseller, Love and Colour by Bolu Babalola. She is a brilliant new writer. I actually do a little bit of fiction. So I do about 10% fiction and 90% non-fiction. And she's a fiction author. And her debut novel is coming out next year, called Honey and Spice. She's amazing. I publish Dr. Shola Moshogbemimu, and she is an incredible activist and feminist. She famously took on Piers Morgan very recently, and she's just a pleasure to work with, and such an incredible woman. I also published the Receipts podcast, who are an incredible millennial women's podcast, and they've got a book coming out in June. And in autumn, I am publishing, which is very crazy to me, Lil Kim's autobiography.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was me when I won the auction, to be honest. I am pretty amazed that that's happening, and her story is just incredible.
Oh, I can't wait to read that.
Oh, I know. It's honestly going to be an amazing book. I'm so excited.
That's an amazing list, though. It's so diverse.
Thank you. Thank you. I try.
No, it's amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, and also thank you for sharing your career journey with us. I mean, it's really useful for listeners, I think, to get an example of what a kind of publishing career journey can look like in reality, rather than kind of dreaming about what it could be like. So it's really great to kind of have your experience on what that looked like for you. So thank you so much for that. And I think so our listeners can get a sense of maybe how the publishing industry has evolved. Can you tell us, maybe in your opinion, what the publishing industry was like in the past and what it's like now, and what kind of changes have there been which are impacting women?
Yeah, such a good question. In the past, I know for a fact publishing was a very much an old white men's club. They would do deals over long lunches with with much prosecco. This is just sort of told to me from people who have been around to see the significant changes happen and have seen this sort of older period of publishing where it was so dominated by men. There's been huge changes since. I mean, the industry is like something about 80% women. We are lacking in the sense that is predominantly white women, but on a gender balance, it's quite in favor of women. And I think the what hadn't changed and what still I feel like is slow to change is the fact that men tend to still be in those kind of high up board level positions that still aren't, despite now being a female heavy industry, we still have majority men on the boards, which I think is something that a lot of publishers I know are trying to move forward and change, and I hope that happens very soon.
That's really interesting. It sort of seems to be a bit of a trend across the arts that the majority of people working in it are women, but the people in the senior leadership positions are old, male and stale, I think is one of the phrases that kind of
pale male and stale.
Pale male and stale, that's the one. And it is true, isn't it? And it's the same in music, in art galleries and things like that. So it's so interesting that for me especially to realize that that's actually the same or very similar in the publishing world as well. So I mean, so what kind of roles are women in publishing? Are they kind of more in the kind of junior to mid-level positions? Like, are there any women leading publishing houses?
And there are women on the board, and there's some incredible women who are leading the way. Off the top of my head, Katie Espinard, she runs Orion, she's an MD it's an amazing publishing house. Charmaine Lovegrove is an incredible Black woman publishing, a whole list. I think she's a publisher. So there definitely are, and that's just two people, but there are women really up there now, which is great to see. But yeah, I think there tends to be there's a lot of women on all levels of sort of like from assistant, junior to managerial level, but it is kind of on that, I think, managerial upwards, it starts to become a lot more sparse. And I do kind of wonder if that's to do with women then having children, and so they're not necessarily pushed for advancements, and then men basically overtake them. Not sure, but that's kind of the layout at the moment.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to kind of investigate, why that drop off happens. And like you said, is it because women, need to focus on the families and things like that? And obviously we know that, men don't have so many ties when it comes to that, to that part of life. So yeah, it would be really interesting if somebody could do a study on
yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, because that would be really, really fascinating to see, because, like you said, like 80% of women are working in the publishing industry. So you would think they would be more evenly distributed in those upper levels as well, seeing as there's so many kind of coming through.
Yeah, and incredibly, with a predominantly women workforce, there's still a gender pay gap. And that kind of says it, that says it all, really.
It really does. Oh my goodness, really? Gosh.
Yeah.
It's so shocking. It's really shocking. I mean, it's terrible that exists anyway, let alone in publishing. My goodness. So lots of things that need to maybe be changed for the future then. So progress has been made, but still room for improvement for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was going to ask, you gave two great examples of Katie and Charmaine, but where do you think women lead in publishing?
As in department wise?
Yeah.
Oh, I think there are women leading, not just in editorial. I feel like sometimes in publishing we can be so editorial focused at times, and as an editor I feel like I fall into that as well, and I try not to, because there are women doing incredibly well in publicity, in marketing, in rights. There's an incredible rights director called Rebecca Folland who works in my company. There are women working in production, finance, all these areas. I think it's quite well distributed. I see, I imagine that, I hope that there are role models for young women starting out in all spaces and all departments start publishing. Obviously, I'm more switched on to editorial people, but I definitely know there are women properly leading the way in those other spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point that, working for a publishing house isn't just being an editor or somebody who commissions authors and works. There's a whole system in place there, isn't there? Like you said, like even accounts,
Yeah.
that
royalties, they have a whole job.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I think that's really important for listeners to realize that, if you want to have a career in publishing, and you're fascinated by literature and things like that, but you have maybe a background in accounting, you can work for a publishing house in accounting.
Yes, there's so many ways in, and design, for example, but it doesn't have to be, working on the actual text. You could be working on covers for it, and designers are such a huge, we say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do. So designers are hugely important.
Absolutely. That's a really great point that you've raised there, which I think can get very much hidden in this kind of conversational thought process when people think about publishing. So no, I think the big message there is that there are opportunities to have a career in publishing world. And I also wanted to ask, sort of leading on from that, do you think there's a difference between working for an independent or a major publishing house? And do they sort of differ on their role of women within their organizations at all?
I think some of the independent publishers were started up by women, and so they maybe have come a bit further with women sort of running the way, whereas I think some of the ones that have been around for a long time, again, are sort of still trying to battle off that kind of white male systemic system that they've created, whereas I think some of the more independent publishers have started more recently, or and are just maybe more flexible and able to sort of keep with the times more. But having not worked in an independent publisher, I probably couldn't speak fully on that, but I definitely know that there can be a little bit more flexibility on a sort of smaller scale.
No, absolutely. And do you think that the major publishing houses are sort of focusing on the role of women within their companies, trying to, maybe have a support network there, or, being able to, support women in their careers, and, being able to, facilitate them to achieve what they want to achieve within their, within their publishing house? Because I know that sort of in the music industry, particularly at Warner's, they have a whole kind of working group set up for women in music to make sure that women within the company get to achieve the things that they want to achieve, which is a really amazing idea. And I was just wondering, is there anything like that within the publishing industry?
So all of the big publishers that I know of tend to have networks which are kind of cross the company networks, where we kind of talk about issues like this. So for example, at Hachette we have the Gender Balance Network, which is run by women to try and create more equality. And I'm pretty sure Penguin has a similar one, but I think there is some great work to sort of further women, but I feel that what's missing is sometimes furthering opportunities for Black women and women of other ethnic minorities. Like, my feminism is very much about all women of every background, and I definitely, there's not enough representation right now. And I think sometimes, you know, then there needs to be sort of like empowering these women up with us to make sure that they're included in our, you know, our publishing industry, and included in our furthering of women within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. There's so much more that can be done to support women of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and, you know, to try and support them to, you know, have the careers that they want to have, and across all the arts, to be fair.
Yeah, they're battling different things as well, and they're really coming up against it when it comes to, you know, trying to you know, they're women and they're from a minority ethnic background, and it's so much more to deal with on an intersectional level. And I think there can be more specific support directed at them to sort of further their careers, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, just to kind of move on to another topic, I'd like to touch a little bit on the kind of writing side of publishing, because obviously that's quite an integral part of the publishing world. And I wanted to ask you a question that has been on my mind, I have to say, for years, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. And I was wondering, like, is there any evidence to say that women or male writers are more successful? You know, is this just a complete myth? Because you sort of hear on the grapevine that women authors win more awards and accolades, but men sell more books. And I was just wondering, like, is this all just hooey? Or is it actually really equal? I'd just love to get your insight on that.
Oh, I really wish there was data on this that I had to hand, but I am I'm pretty sure it's quite equal. I mean, you see now in the bestseller lists, I feel like it's way more equal when it comes to specifically white men and white women being represented on those top bestseller lists. And I do think there is balance there for sure when it comes to I think even ethnic minority and Black men in writers, as well as, again, Black and ethnic minority women writers. That representation is not there at all. So I think there's like a yes and no to that. I think there is some, you know, there's some great success happening with women writers that is incredible to see, and I don't think men are being hard done by at all, because I still am seeing a lot of men in the bestseller charts. But yeah, I think what we're missing a lot more is that representation beyond that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think can be done to improve that representation of ethnic minority authors?
Publishing more of them, which sounds like a very simple thing, but unfortunately is not. It's just normalizing it across the board. I think, you know, it's something ridiculous, like 2% of all books published within like last year were by Black and ethnic minority writers, and that just can't be the case. They make up 40% of London, I think. 45%, I think. So it has to be it has to get better. Absolutely. And that just comes from publishers being very proactive, and agents also who are gatekeepers being very proactive to make sure that they are finding writers in this area and really giving them the opportunity to have that writing career, and giving them the same level of sort of funding behind them for the books as well. You know, I think typically a lot of white writers will get so much money put behind the marketing and publicity, and we need to be doing the same across the board. So it's about making real proactive steps within the editors, but also just the whole business putting the money behind it as well. That's really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really shocked that it's only 2%, Katie. That's just,
it's something mad like that. I think it's children's books as well. The statistic for that was just like harrowing, considering young children having books that show them should be it should be just the most essential thing, but it's not.
No, absolutely. That's just, yeah, really shocking. So I'm really happy that you've raised that, because it's important to shout about it, and to tell people that this is the situation, and that, you know, work still absolutely needs to be done across the whole kind of, like you said, the whole publishing sector, you know, including the agents, marketing, finance, you know, it really is the whole kind of, you know, setting the wheels in motion, and it should be equal. I mean, why should it be any different? You know, and that's what I think really I find quite sad, really, is that, you know, why should that be any different, you know, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman or where you come from or your background. You know, if you're launching an amazing novel or nonfiction, then you should absolutely have the investment and support that you need to make that a success. And that's in everyone's interest, surely.
Surely. I mean, hopefully change will come. I mean, you know, I remember reading about and watching films about the time when women literally couldn't get books published and would have to write under pseudonyms. And I'm sure we all have heard those stories from history. And this is the new that, and it will change. But yeah, it's better if people kind of choose to be on the right side of history with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask actually about pen names, because I was wondering if that was still actually a thing in publishing. You know, are women authors encouraged to have a pen name or a gender neutral name?
I would say no. I think it's very much that's the author's decision now, if they felt a very specific kind of way about it. I wouldn't say it's something that is, I can't imagine myself ever suggesting them to change their name. I think that is almost from another time now, but then people might have their reasons. I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I suppose if you have your own personal reasons for anonymity or something like that, then that makes like total sense. But yeah, I wasn't sure if it was still one of those kind of myths from the past that, you know, that you if you were a woman, you absolutely had to have a pen name or just go by your initials or something like that, so that, you know, men would buy your book, or that, you know, that somehow meant that your book was better quality because it was written by a man, you know, all of those awful things that are just not true.
I think certain genres, it's kind of stuck around a bit longer than others. I think, you know, really? That kind of like crime and thriller, serious military histories like that. I think it can be really hard for women to publish that under their own name. I think but I feel like that's not of the last 10 years. I feel like that was maybe before.
Yeah, no, that's a really good positive thing to hear, isn't it? That, you know, if you want to write under your own name, then you absolutely can do. And that's, you know, nobody's pressurizing anyone to
definitely
by initials or by something else, you know, because that's just awful, really. So no, that's a really encouraging thing to hear about. But one of the things I did want to ask as well was sort of going back to gender again, was, you know, does anybody actually care about the gender or ethnicity even of an author? You know, where is this coming from? You know, is it coming from outside the industry? You know, does the publishing industry think that that's what readers want? You know, that they want to hear from, you know, males or females or whoever. You know, this is actually, you know, just a reaction to what readers want, but the publishing industry itself doesn't actually care. It would just be interesting to know, like, what is this sort of symptomatic of? Because it must be coming from somewhere.
I feel like publishing is super reflective of the world that we're in, and that it really just shows in all of the books that we publish. I think it is in part driven by consumers. I guess there's something we talk about in publishing. It's called competitor titles, and these are basically what we base our sales numbers on and what we base what we're going to go forward publishing on. It's a bit of a flawed concept, but if you've only been publishing, for example, white men in a certain area, and that's the only thing that's been successful, that you end up only continuing to publish the white men in that specific genre. Right. And I feel like it's just that pattern, and what needs to be done more is sort of shaking that up and, you know, being like, well, no, this book doesn't have a competitor title, nothing has been done like it. No author of this, you know, this woman's background or this other background has ever written this, but that's a great thing, because that's meeting a new market. Because so often, you know, publishing is targeted, it's been targeted at a certain market, of a book buying market, and that sometimes isn't extended to include people who are book buying but not necessarily been catered to for a long time.
Absolutely. No, it feels like a very kind of almost like old-fashioned, very narrow way of thinking about the market, you know, with these competitor titles.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Like, it's just crazy, actually. I was like really surprised hearing you talk about that, because I've never heard of that before at all.
It's I guess it's strange in a creative industry. You'd think was, you know, I guess it's a way of mitigating risk and trying to find a way of basing what we pay for something, to base it on something that's happened before, which is, it can be helpful but not always. I think that's the main takeaway.
Exactly. It sort of helps to give you a baseline, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be the kind of be all and end all of the situation. And like you said, especially if somebody's doing something groundbreaking, where do they fit into that? So that's really interesting. And I also wanted to ask, actually, is it, and we sort of touched on this a little bit already, but is it more difficult to sort of get signed or get published as a female writer?
I'd like to say no. I mean, I think sometimes if they're writing in a specific area, I would probably say, I would imagine that their credentials would get questioned more so than if a man was writing in that area. I can totally see that happening, and I have seen that happen.
Oh gosh.
But I think no, I would say, you know, there are so many brilliant women agents out there now who are commissioning women's writers, women's fiction, but also women agents who are commissioning women for, you know, history and politics and everything under the sun. So I would say on the whole no, but I'm also not going to be ignorant of the realities that exist when, you know, women do come under a bit more scrutiny when they're, you know, what is your ability to write on this X subject?
Yeah, that makes sense. But surely that kind of scrutiny should fall to everyone. You know,
exactly, it should.
You know, again, it's that kind of sort of almost subconscious gender bias in a way.
Yeah, it is unconscious bias for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just have a few more questions for you, Katie, to sort of finish off our discussion today. And I'd really love to ask you if you could highlight maybe a key moment for you where a woman overcame the odds in publishing or made changes to the industry which made an impact.
Wow, yeah, I mean, that's so hard. I know so many brilliant women I'd love to call out. I mean, for me, someone who really inspires me is her name is Mireille Harper, and she is the editor of Square Peg, and she you know, she started around the same time as me, so she's relatively young in this industry, and she's done so much in that space of time. She's essentially running Square Peg, and it's her and another Black woman who run the company, and she's publishing just such interesting books, like really sort of going against the grain and setting whole new trends. And it's just super exciting to see someone like that who's just killing it and doing something really different and overcoming a lot of odds against her. I mean, she's one of very few Black women in the industry, and she's already at that level. I mean, it's quite an amazing feat of to be doing that. So she is someone I wanted to shout out for sure.
Oh, she sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm definitely going to look her up after our conversation.
She's great. She's also got an obscene amount of Instagram followers because she created a asset for when the Black Lives Matter movement was happening last year. She created an asset called 10 Steps to Nonoptical Allyship, and it went absolutely viral. Wow. And Ariana Grande shared it. And
oh my goodness.
She's just one of those people who when she writes and when she speaks, she does so with real gusto and you want to listen. So that was just a sort of example of that.
Wow, that's so inspiring to hear that, she's been able to make those strides, and make those changes, and like you said, to be heard. That's so impressive in such a competitive industry.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really amazing. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, I mean, we've touched on some of these already, but maybe you want to take the opportunity to maybe dive into these a bit more. But what are the gaps that you think still need to be addressed in the industry? And, what do you think can actually be done to make these effective?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I feel like I have said some of this, but like, I really think there needs to be more women at that top level making decisions, and hopefully then will better the prospects and careers of women coming up in the industry, and making sure they don't come up against they're not falling behind because of maternity leave and all these things that shouldn't hold anyone back anymore.
Yeah.
And another gap is just the representation of Black and ethnic minority women. I have some incredible friends who are doing some amazing work, but they are too few in an industry that should be super representative. And that's just not just them, it's also men as well, of sort of minority backgrounds. And I would just love to see that. And I think that change comes from not just setting targets, but to actually take action and making sure that the culture within the companies is very welcoming and accepting, and not, I think there's a lot of effort put into creating internships and creating these entry-level spaces, but there's not enough done about actually nurturing these people and making sure that they feel that their work is being valued and ascend up the ranks. And that's what I would love to see more of. And I think that probably comes from training and putting money behind these people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I think those are really great gaps that you've identified there. And I would really hope that, over the next few years or even sooner, that we'll be able to see those changes and, and see those things actually being implemented proactively and honestly and transparently in the publishing industry to make this happen.
Fingers crossed. I think the first step is acknowledging the what we're not doing, and publishing is doing that, which is great. And that's the first step, is to actually have the conversation. So now I'm really ready for sort of the movement to happen and action.
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic point. And my final question to you, Katie, is what are your key words of advice to women wanting to get into the publishing industry?
Well, for women wanting to get into the publishing industry, I would say, yes, it's competitive. It's all of that. Every creative industry is, but believe in your talent, believe in your uniqueness of perspective, and never forget that publishing, it runs on a currency of ideas. And if you are bringing new ideas and you are bringing a fresh perspective, you are bringing a lot to the game, and you deserve a place there. And just don't give up. It's what everyone says, but it's really important. And I would love to just see more super talented young women in every area of publishing. That would just be the best possible thing. And the same applies to women writers as well. And a big tip for them would just be, just start writing, because the hardest part is starting, and that's how you practice. Writing is a skill, and it requires practice. So just keep going with that. It's not going to be perfect on your first draft.
No, those are brilliant tips, Katie. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
No worries.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today to talk and share your experiences and your expertise with us on this absolutely amazing topic. And I really, really hope that, maybe in a year's time, we can come back to this and look at all the changes that have happened and all the positive things that have changed in the industry, which we've highlighted today. That would be really, really interesting to see.
That would be amazing. Thanks so much for having me. I've had an absolutely brilliant time chatting to you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, Katie, for being with us today to discuss women in publishing. Thank you also to Merlin Thomas, our editor, and Robert Cochran, composer of our theme tune music. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out all the other episodes from the Culture Bar, with topics ranging from asking, can art and digital mix, to awareness and representation in the arts. We've had guests from the Whitechapel Gallery, BBC and the British Museum, from former pro football referees to members of the UK Parliament and practicing musicians and artists. And to get all of that and more, please subscribe or leave us a review.